Balochistan is a sparsely populated region that is split between modern-day Iran, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. Unlike the neighboring Pashtun people, the Baloch never had an expansive empire. The people of Balochistan have mostly engaged in defensive warfare against Persian, British, and Indian invaders. Although the Baloch as a nation has not yet been able to overthrow the yoke of domination and subjugation, their struggle for national sovereignty has emerged time and again. From the 17th century until 1928, Balochistan preserved its independent status. The Baloch Khanates maintained diplomatic relations with Mughal India, Ottoman Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Oman, and British India. The occupation of Balochistan by the modern armies of Iran and Pakistan led to the birth of the Baloch liberation movement. Prior to the partition of the Indian subcontinent, the British used Balochistan as a buffer state, which means that they ruled it indirectly through tribal leaders and chiefs. The British wanted to gain control of Balochistan for strategic reasons, not only to buffer against expanding Persian influence, but also to stop the expanding Russian Empire from reaching the Indian Ocean, because this was a big threat to the British commercial dominance in the region. Another key reason for British interest in Balochistan was because Balochistan was sparsely populated and would be a good place to station British troops who were fighting in the Anglo-Afghan wars. Before gaining control of Balochistan, British caravans would pass through the region and would be frequently attacked and robbed by Baloch tribes. The British Army initially tried to invade Balochistan in the 1830s, but were faced with fierce armed opposition from Baloch tribes. Therefore, the British adopted a new policy in the region that supported their divide rule policy in India. Similar to British policies in Yemen and Afghanistan, the British manipulated the tribal system of the Balochistan region. In 1841, the British signed a treaty and recognized Nasir Khan II as the ruler of the Khanate of Kalat. This treaty also stated that British troops could be stationed in Baloch territory. However, since the leader was handpicked by the British, many Baloch Sardars who previously had influence in the region were now stripped of their political power. This divide and rule policy created tensions between Baloch tribes. Therefore, although the British were able to set up bases in Balochistan, rebellions and disturbances continued throughout their rule. Leaders such as Sher Dil Khan Baloch and Muhammad Mari led huge revolts and ambushes against the British, in which hundreds of British soldiers were killed. On the 15th of August 1947, the Baloch leader Ahmad Yar Khan Ahmadzai declared independence from the British. However, Muhammad Ali Jinnah later convinced him to become a part of the newly formed Pakistan. Thus, Eastern Balochistan was incorporated into the newly formed country of Pakistan. However, many other Baloch leaders, such as his younger brother Prince Agha Abdul Karim Baloch, revolted against his decision and refused to recognize Pakistan. Moving on, the history of Western Balochistan is also filled with stories of firm resistance against outside encroachment. There is a long history of conflict between the Baloch and various Persian dynasties. In medieval times, the Baloch faced massacre, genocide, and forced migration from various dynastic rulers in Iran. Various Persian rulers ordered the total annihilation of the Baloch. Great propaganda campaigns by Persian dynasties portrayed the Baloch people as savages who should be destroyed. Even one of the most famous poets in Persian history, known as Firdausi, praised the king Nosharwan's genocide of Balochis in his poem known as Shahnameh. This racist attitude was later criticized by Iranian writer Ahmad Kasravi, who condemned Firdausi's verses which encouraged dictatorship and blind obedience to despotic rulers. The Persians had been increasing their penetrations in Balochistan from the beginning of the Safavid dynasty in Iran. During this time, the Baloch fought intense battles against the Persian forces concentrated in Kerman, who were increasingly interfering with the affairs of the Baloch regions. The Persian army under the command of Prince Iskandar and the nephew of Gurjin Khan attacked Sarhad and devastated the area, killing hundreds of the Baloch and burning their settlements. On hearing the invasion of the Persians on Sarhad, Shah Salim Nosharwani rushed towards Kharan, but in an ambush by the Persian army, he was captured along with several of his chiefs and fighters. The captured Baloch were executed, and Iskandar sent the heads of 66 Baloch chiefs to Isfahan. The Baloch also rebelled against the Qajar dynasty. After the British occupation of Kalat in eastern Balochistan, Qajar rulers of Persia made sustained efforts to strengthen their grip on the western part of Balochistan. In 1843, the Baloch were defeated by the Qajar army, and the Persians arrested 3,700 Baloch from the surrounding areas of Bampur and sold them into slavery. During 1871, the British agreed to the Persian proposal for the division of Balochistan by officially demarcating the boundary line and separating the British and Persian areas of influence in Balochistan. Furthermore, some of the Baloch territories were ceded to Afghanistan, and nearly half of the Baloch land was awarded to Persia. The Baloch also faced the anger of the British and Qajars because of a telegraph line which was to link British India with Europe through Balochistan and Persia. Disturbances created by the Baloch on the construction of the line and the security of the telegraph line from Karachi to Basra, passing through southern Balochistan, was another important factor for the division of Balochistan. The Baloch resistance against the Persians and the British manifested itself in raids on camps of surveyors and other installments of telegraph lines. On several occasions, British officials were attacked and killed by groups of the Baloch, with the endorsement of their chiefs. The British retaliation, on the other hand, was out of proportions. On November 1897, Mr. Graves, who was an intelligence officer attached with the Indo-European Telegraph Project, was killed in the Karawan region. In 1898, as a consequence of his murder, a massive invasion of southern Balochistan was launched by the British. Forces were sent from India and stationed at Chahbar and Jask. This British attack was with the implicit approval of the Persian authorities. A ruthless and bloody campaign was launched, and hundreds of the Baloch were killed and many of their settlements were burned during 1898. Such economic exploitation of the Balochistan region can also be seen today. For example, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, also known as CPEC, has exploited Balochistan's resources such as the strategic Gwadar port in Balochistan while ignoring the needs of the locals. Therefore, Baloch insurgents who oppose development projects in Gwadar have blown up various gas pipelines, attacked Chinese engineers, and targeted trains carrying construction equipment. The Baloch independence movement continued throughout the 1900s and has continued into the current century. Resistance has come in violent forms and also in the form of peaceful political activism demanding rights for Balochis and protesting the mistreatment of Balochis in Pakistan and Iran. The Balochi independence movement has faced violent crackdowns as a result of neglectful government policies of both Iran and Pakistan. The region of Balochistan remains underdeveloped and economically deprived.